Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at using Partner Center Ingestion API for managing Azure application offers in Azure Marketplace. So let's begin. In the documentation, under Azure Marketplace documentation, in a section related to creating new offers and Azure application offers, there is an API for onboarding. And what this does, it describes the process for creating a service principal in an Azure Active Directory, then adding that service principal to the Partner Center account, and then obtaining a token using that service principal, and we'll see using the specific resource type. And once we're done with that, we will have a bearer token we can pass to use this store submission APIs that are documented using Swagger. You can download the Swagger right here under this endpoint. This API does not currently have a detailed documentation explaining what each section here means, and therefore the way we will look into it is kind of mapping it back to the user experience that you see here and trying to see for each experience, let's say listing offers or viewing a specific offer, how to do that via the API. An important point about this API is that even though it will likely return offers of type virtual machine and Azure application and managed service, this API right now is kind of meant for Azure applications, so solution templates and managed apps, and that's what we will look in this video. We'll take a look maybe in the future at how to use that or other APIs for Azure virtual machines. Software as a service application can also be managed through this API in a similar way. So this is the API Swagger, and you can take a look at all of the specifics here. We'll kind of evaluate all of these, but we'll approach it in a way of what shows in this table. Basically, for the offer screen, which API should we call? For the offer overview, which API should we call? For offer setup, which API should we call? Properties, offer listings, etc. We will probably not go through all of these calls because that's going to be too many and repetitive, but we will look at a few representatives of them to see which APIs map to what. And we'll do that in Postman to make it very easy to follow. Okay, so let's begin. So step number one is we would need to create the service principal and assign it. I already did that, so let's take a look at what we have. So inside of your portal and in the tenant that's tied to your Partner Center account, in my case, this is it, I created an application registration. And what I need for that application registration is I will need its client ID and I will need its client secret that I created already. That's step number one. I don't need any special API permissions, and also this application does not need to be multi-tenant, just a regular application. Okay, so that's step number one. Step number two is inside of the Partner Center, as the document says, we would go under Developer Settings, and in the Developer Settings, under Users, we would click Add Azure Applications. It would look inside of our Azure Active Directory tenant, show us all the applications that we can add. We check a box and add it. As you can see, I don't have to do it anymore because this application was added by me previously for managing my tenant. And you can see I gave it all kinds of permissions, so it can do many operations by this API. So at this point, we basically got through this part of the documentation. Now we need to obtain an Azure Access token. So in my Postman collection, I have a collection I started creating called Partner Center Ingestion API. And in there, we will be able to obtain our token, file documentation. That's my tenant ID. And in the body, we will make a request using the client credential, the client secret, which I'll reset for this video, and then the resource. And this is the important part. This is how we tell it to give us the token specific for that. So once we get this token, I have a tiny piece of code running here that's taking this access token and storing it in the environment variable partner center access token API, so I can use it in all of these other methods. Okay, so we got a token that's valid for about 1 hour based on this number of seconds. Great. So now let's take a look at the partner center user experience. And what we'll see is, hey, how do I see this list of offers? Okay, how do I see this list of offers? Same idea, product IDs, offer types, and when they were created. So using the documentation, following the documentation here, looking through this, you'll see that there is a way to get products. Let's see, products, right? So you can get a return collection of products, and you can look at the documentation and see the specifics. But let's take a look at it in action. So here is my call, ingestion products. I do pass it that access token in the bearer header, and I do send request. So as we can see in this JSON return, it returns to me my Azure application with the names, and it's showing me their IDs as well. And you can see that these things are mapping, and I can see that VM that, like I mentioned, it's getting returned by this API, but maybe we cannot use it for that. We'll skip it for this video. But you can see software as a service and other applications. So the key information that I see on this screen is obtained through the Get Products API. Let's now pick one of these applications. This is its ID, and this is the screen I see. So this is an offer overview page with a nice publisher status and a plan overview. Where do we get this information in the API? So in the API, we can get what's called product submission workflow details. So this is our product ID. This is our submission ID. I will show you where we get that from. And that is the workflow details. And if we send this request, again, it's authorized using our bearer token, as we discussed before, right there, that we obtained, file for an hour. We can see automated validations, preview creation, publisher sign-off, all of this information, again, mapping back to what you see right here with the times. And this is called a workflow. And this workflow is of the submission. And how did I know the submission ID? The submission ID came from the product submission. So for a specific product, I can see, hey, show me all of the submissions. I'll remove the filter. And we can see the request, and it shows me this is the submission. These are the specific IDs that were submitted at that time for the components or modules of that offer and its variants. We'll talk about those, when it was published, and submission ID is right here. And this is the number, if you see, that we've been using to see the workflow details. Great. So far, what we're able to see, as we can see in this table, is we were able to get the submission workflow details for the overview. Let's go back and look at the UI and say, okay, we need now to see these little plans, these plans. So what they're called inside of that API, they're called product variants. Product variants. And again, we need the product ID of our offer and then variants. And if we submit this request, we will see that we have two variants. One of them is this default variant that always exists called test drive. We ignored that for now. And we're going to look at this Azure SKU variant is the one that represents the plan. And you can see its plan ID, you can see the type of plan, and its specific identifier, this variant identifier. If you had multiple plans, they would be returned here. So at this point, we are able to return these plans, and that's what we see. And if you hover over it, and if we open it up in a second in a different screen, we'll see that this is the product variant. So what's the offer setup page like? Here we see information about the alias and the CRM system that's connected. And again, going back to our table, for offer setup, we can get the product to get the alias, and we can get the product setup call. And again, how do you map it back? You would see it right here, product setup with the product ID. So if we go here and in Postman, we say, give us the product setup, we're going to see, great, this is the setup, no test drive enabled, resale disabled. So that's the product setup. What is our next screen? Our next screen is properties. Or even let's just before the properties, let's take a look at one more piece here called customer leads. How would we know where to get customer leads? Well, we see lead configuration somewhere on this page. Let's see lead configuration, and we can issue a postman call for the lead configuration and see it as well. So lead configuration, product ID, and you'll see the lead configuration coming back right here. Okay, great. So the next step is getting to see the properties. We saw we did not look at the properties yet in details. It's the categories, the terms, and the tenant ID. So the way we look at the properties, and this is where it gets much more interesting, is in this documentation, we see this concept of branches. So we need to get branches first. And you can see the branches exist for things like listings, packages, properties, and availabilities. We're going to make this call. We're going to get back a list of branches. And each branch will have an instance ID of the type that we can use then to get the specifics. So let's take a look in Postman to make it more concrete. So get branches. So this is our product ID, branches, get by module, module equals property. So we're getting now the IDs of the branches of module property. Let's see what that looks like. And we can see we have one, and the key idea here is this current draft ID. So let's grab this and copy and paste this draft ID. Why do we need it? Because the product properties call in the documentation is described as get by instance ID, product ID, and then for the instance ID, we specify the ID, the current ID of the branch that we grabbed. And now we are seeing a JSON that maps nicely with the categories, as you can tell, and other custom amendments and different descriptions that maps to what we see on this screen. So this is properties for a given instance, because there could be many versions over time of this offer. This is the current draft instance. Let's go to the offer listing. How do we get the information that is on this page? Titles, descriptions, etc. The way we do that is, again, we are going to get our branches, but this time for the module equals listing. Module equal listing for the same product. So let's see what we get. We're going to get a couple line items. We're going to get the listing draft ID for the product itself, the offer level. We're going to get one for the test drive, which we are not using, and we're going to get one for our variant. And if you remember, this was the variant ID, the plan ID of the one plan under this offer. So let's start with product listing. So for a product listing, now we have the product listings get by instance ID. We pass the current draft ID there, and you can see the information about that listing. That's the description. These are the different links that we submitted, the support information, etc. So again, all of this is mapping to this screen. Most this information on this screen. Now, where are these images? Let's see how these images and logos come to be, and how we can pull them from Postman. So let's close these UIs so it's a little easier to follow. Let's look at product listing images, right? So we got ourselves product ID and the listing ID. Where is this listing ID coming from? Just let's repeat it again. We got it by instance ID, and we got ourselves the listing. And this is, let's say, this is the ID that we will be using right here. You can see this is the listing ID. We're going to make this call, and we see the images. the different sizes of images that are there. We don't see the actual URLs of these images because they were submitted via the UI and the API is not pulling the bits of those. But let's try to create another product image listing. So we're going to do a post to this URL. Again, no magic. How do we know this URL? It's going to be documented here for listing images right here, and we're going to do this post to create a listing. So let's take a look at this in action because this one's kind of interesting. We're going to post a body. In the body, we're going to say listing image is the type. And how do we know the type? Well, we can reverse engineer it by making a call to see it. We're going to give it a name. We're going to give it the type of the logo. Is it small or big? And we're going to set it to pending upload. Okay. We're going to make this call. Okay, so we made the call, and what this call returned to us is pending upload, right? So let's just reverse this back and see. We're going to see it right on the bottom here, pending upload. And this is the writable SAS URL where we need to upload the image. So the next call our automation system would have to do is putting the image right there. Let's look in the portal what it looks like while we are doing that. So let's refresh this page. And you can see it's not happy because this file is not yet uploaded and we are kind of uploading a second version of it. But let's upload something here. See, it's complaining that you cannot upload more than two, but we didn't upload anything yet. So let's take a look. How would we upload this? So the way we would upload it is we could use an AZ copy command, point it to an image that we want to upload, and then point it to the writable URI that we got back. So this is the URL with the SAS signature into which we will upload the data. So I'm just going to make the change in line here. Okay, and let's try to run this AZ copy command and see what we get. Oops. Let's try again. So it says it completed uploading one image. Let's go back to the UI, and probably now it's going to show us the blue image. Maybe not yet because we did not yet update the status. Right, we did not yet update the status. It shows us it's still not uploaded because it's still pending upload. And now what we're going to do is we would do a put call on that image. So let's grab its ID and finish the upload by making a put call on that image and including the correct information in here. Let's grab this. We'll show you with an error so we can see it exactly. So this is going to be our put call to this image, and we're going to say upload it for confirming that we did upload it. And it may fail now due to the e-tag check. Let's just see. Nope. So it says uploaded. Let's see if the status says uploaded. And then now in the portal, the image should appear, but the error message will still be there saying that you cannot have, right, the image is there, but it's not liking that we have more than one logo. And we can delete it here, or we can delete it through the API using the delete calls. So let's see now that we deleted it. We should not see this image appearing here any longer, right? So it's only one. Great. So that's approximately how images are uploaded. Similar approach would be applied to uploading the actual zip files with the managed application. So let's take a look at the next step, availability, right? So we're going to get the availability of the offer. So this is the request. It's returned to us the availability and two things. So let's look at product availability. What does that mean? So we're going to do a call called product availabilities by instance ID. And this call will show us the values of subscriptions that are whitelisted. So what does this map to? This maps to so we looked at all of this stuff. Images and videos would be analogous to what we did there. Preview audience is under the availabilities. So let's take a look. What does that mean? It means that under this screen, we're going to have these preview audiences, and these are the subscriptions that we see here. Perfect. Now we already did this call for product variants. We know this is one plan under this product, and this is its information. Now let's take a look at that specific product variant, right? Right there, and it says, okay, show me the listings. So what is this instance ID? This instance ID is, if you remember, we did the branches for listings. We now need to take the ID from over here for this variant for the listings. And under product variant listings, we're going to use that ID. And we're going to see the listing, right? The information about the plan with its description, etc. So we are seeing, if we go under plan overview, pick a plan, and we see what's here. What about pricing and availability? Pricing and availability. How do we see that? We saw product availability, but how do we see a plan availability? So it's called, in the API I saw, it's called feature availabilities. That's the API name. So again, just to point it back, it's going to be somewhere here called feature availability. Maybe towards the top somewhere, feature availability. And this is obtained using an instance ID. Which instance ID? We are using the instance ID that we need to obtain from the branches call. So let's go back to the branches call, make that call, and look at the variant. This is the ID. And for this ID, we can get the feature availability. So let's put this ID right here and see what we're going to get. We're going to get back a big response. And it basically includes which clouds it is in, pricing schedule, and you can see it's a pretty extensive JSON output of all these pricing points and custom meters, etc. And basically what it's mapping to what you see on this availability page, import, export data, etc. What about this technical configuration? This is actually where the template is attached, right? And this is called a package. Okay, so how do we get packages? So we can say, give me a package, give me the branches for a package. And this we can see is the main offer, and this is the current draft. And at the moment, there may be an issue with this call, but so let's look at the packages for a second. So we're going to point it to this, and we can see, okay, it consists of this package, and it was processed. This package configuration, I think at the moment, my product is having an issue with this, so we may get an error here. And maybe in another video I can show how it's supposed to work, but basically it's complaining about something. But this call right here would actually return the information that's below, right? All of this other information about the package. Okay, great. What else do we have left? We now need to know, okay, so how do we saw the workflow details, we're almost done. How do we create a submission? So this review and publish button. So let's click it and see. In the review and publish, you can see it has all of these properties, listings, and technical configuration information. That's what's been changed, and some notes for certification team, and publish. What can we do API wise to make the same thing? It's a little bit complex, but let's take a look. We can get product submissions, so that can show us what previous submissions looked like. So I'm just going to close this Postman tabs to make it a little easier. And you can see a submission will be there. It went to preview. These were the resources that got published, the offer level, the availability instance ID, listing instance ID, package, property, the same ones we got from branches. And then for the plan, when it happened, when it was completed, and we also used it for this workflow details before to get idea of the steps and validations. If we wanted to submit our own submission, how would we do it? The way we would do it is we would make a post to the submissions API, and in the bodies, this is the more interesting and challenging part, we would have this submission creation request resource type, would say go to preview again, and then inside of this resources, we would point for the availability listing package and property to the proper IDs that we get. Notice, let's say for this availability 86C. Where is that from? 86C is from the branch ID. So in the branch, you can see for the product and for the offer information. So for example, let's take a look again. Availability, listing, package, and property. What we see in availability is we see a draft ID, let's say this one. So let's take a look. And then let's go to product, availability, make a request, and find that ID that we were looking in submission. So I just paused the video for a second to fix up these because it was taking a little bit of time to copy and paste them. So basically, these module IDs need to be collected by getting things like availability ID for product and a variant, and they would go into product and the variant. Same thing for listing, same thing for package and property. We just say listing, collect those two IDs. Excluding the test drive, and put them in. And then basically these, I filled this up and I did a submission. This is a test from API for certification nodes on today's date. If I try to submit it again, we'll get an error message that it's already running. And you can see that this submission is happening right now. Okay. And what we also can see is if we do a submission call, let's say get product submissions. This is published, so this is not what we want. Just see. If you remember, that's the one we looked at 3. This one is in progress. These are the IDs I gave it and resolved them. Let me see. 7B, 7C, 8E, B1. You can see D22 right here. Some of these, as you can notice, it converts it. So that's what, it looks like a GUID here. It looks like non-GUID there. But basically, this is the submission that's being created, and it's right now in progress. And if we do a workflow detail on this submission using its ID, we can see that it started some of these things and this one finished. So supposedly this is updating. Just double check. You can see that, right? Cool. And final point about this API is pushing to production. Obviously needs to be super careful, but under the submissions API, there is this promote one. So once it's, just a post to the promote to do it's equivalent to pressing the go live button that appears here. So in this video, just to recap what we did, we looked at this API for onboarding, okay, how to create service principal, how to go to this documentation that has all these Swagger documented APIs, and then we looked at one call at a time through all these different calls, trying to map between the UI and the UI, not necessarily using the same APIs, but we try to use it to guide us, like what are the different APIs to call. And as you can see, there's multiple calls that need to be made to create different actions via this API. So it's not the simplest of APIs to use. And it actually is described here. After you have a token, you call the to create an update submission is typically call multiple methods in specific order, getting the branches, getting the IDs, and making the call. So it is definitely feasible, in particular if you want to build a read-only UI on top of what's happening with the offer, what its status is, but even for some of those submissions is possible. And we looked at Azure Applications specifically, Azure App and Managed Application. And what's interesting, I think we can see here, just to wrap up for a second, is for a SaaS offer, we can also do many of the same things using the same approaches. Just need to explore a little bit what part of the offer is stored in what part of the UI. And one thing that I want to show is you can create a product as well. You just do a push like this to create the definition. Again, virtual machines, this is just an example, is not something that this API right now supports all the way, but same thing could be done for deleting products. And again, it's documented, creating submissions. And I think this actually needs to be here. But for a SaaS application, if we just wanted to see it really quick, this is the technical configuration of the SaaS application that has the most interesting components. This is the ID of the SaaS application. So if we said, give us all the products, we would get the list of products like this. And you can see software as a service, that's our SaaS. This is its ID. So using its ID, we can get the product variants. So now everything should be very familiar. We just swap this product ID right here. And just as a reminder, every call is authenticated right there. So this is our variant for plan 1, plan 2, plan 3. And what we can also see is it has a package. So if we swap this out, same idea, we're going to get package. We got the package, great. And then under package, if we look at the configuration of this package, so we're going to point this to the package and this to the product. And I just want to show you the interesting part. Let's see what we did incorrectly here. So this is going to be our product. And that is the package. And as you can see right here, this information is the information we see here. So same idea, analogous to debug and see what's going on under each plan and submissions, etc. And then the submissions for this product would look very similar, same idea. So under submissions, we can say, hey, what is the submission exactly? And we can see that submission, so same shape as before. Great. That is basically it for today. We kind of looked at that API and we mapped it to all of these screens. If in the future it's possible, we'll make a video to talk about how to use different API or the same API for virtual machines. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.